A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So welcome to this very interesting session centered around the cafe business yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So I'd like to now call upon the panel members who will be taking us through this the next 1 hour. Mr. Shravan, partner, Kalladevpura Coffee LLP. A big round of applause. Please come on stage, sir. A very warm welcome. Mr. Naveen Rajesh, MSP Coffee. A warm welcome to you. Yusuf Alzai, founder, Lee&T. Warm welcome to you as well. Mr. Matt Chittaranjan, co-founder, Blue Tukai Coffee. Please introduce yourselves and then you can begin. So each one of you is making a presentation now?
You can hear me? Yes? Thumbs up? Not enough coffee in the house? Yes? Yes. Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for waiting for us and coming down. My name is Shravan. I'm from Kalladevpura Estate and Coffee. Let me put it across as we're a specialty coffee estate and a small batch roastery based out of Chikmagalur and Bangalore. And happy to be here, share the journey and try to discuss or understand what the coffee business was for the last 10 years or the cafe business in India in specific and what the future looks like, for which we have a very encouraging and a very mixed panel over here, which has green coffee buyers, cafe chains, and leading specialty coffee estates as well.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Naveen Rajesh, and I'm part of a company called MSP Coffee. So we're producers, exporters, and roasters. We run a number of plantations in the Chevroi Hills in Yerkod. And we work with a lot of Indian cafes and roasters and quite a few globally in Europe and Southeast Asia. And it's a pleasure being here and looking forward to the session. And let's have a good 1 hour.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Chittaranjan. I am one of the co-founders of Blue Tukai Coffee. We're a 10-year-old specialty coffee company. We have 80 cafes across the country. We have 3 roasteries. We also sell online and B2B. Actually, Shravan was one of our first estates that we partnered with. We've also been working with Naveen for a number of years and excited to be here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yusuf Al-Zahir. I'm the founder of Lee&T Coffee. I'm a coffee importer based on Saudi Arabia. I've been importing coffee for the past 5-6 years, mainly doing green, specialty, Arabica. I'm not a roaster. I don't roast any coffees, and excited to be here.
Check. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much. The purpose of this panel is to give you a mixed approach from different aspects of the value chain as to what we perceive the market looks like. Okay? So I have come up with a couple of ideas and a couple of questions which I thought is apt for this session and also something which we can share. Definitely something which, one of the first questions which we wanted to share is if all of us, starting with Matt, can share your journey over the last 10 years, especially to get a more specific, was there a correlation to what was happening in the global cafe sector, the market, in relation to development of new coffee brands, new cafe designs, new processing techniques, or getting new customers to come and taste the coffees?
So we actually got in the cafe business a little bit by accident. We've taken a lot of inspiration from what's been happening in the global specialty coffee scene, but you have to understand that India is at a very different place in its journey. So when we opened our first cafe in 2014, it was really just because we had some extra space in our roastery. So we had a small corridor that was 200 square feet. It was in a neighborhood of Delhi that had no natural footfalls. We didn't put in the best equipment. We had fairly basic machines, very basic fit out. just a few tables and a small bar. But that cafe worked because at that point in time, it was very difficult to get good coffee. So people were willing to come to us just because of the product that we had. Now, if we had, at that point in time, started up with a nice fit-out, La Marzocco machines, all the good equipment in a very high-traffic area, we would have failed. The market was not ready at that point in time. And the reason I know that is because we did that 2 years later. We opened up several cafes, and none of them really performed very well. It took a while for them to sort of pick up, so much so that we thought that we'd close them. Now, if you fast forward to today, the market is totally ready for you to replicate what's happening in the global industry. I think actually it's required. One thing for us as a brand that we had always focused on the product at the expense of sort of the look and feel of the cafe. Now I think customers expect the look and feel to be on par with everything that you're serving, so you really have to pay attention to that. That being said, you still have to remember the context here in India. So I know in like the global, especially industry, alt milk products are huge. Many cafes do 30+% of their beverages are with these alt milks. I saw recently that Blue Bottle actually is making alt milk the default. And now in India, you see dozens and dozens of startups doing alt milk. We don't charge for it at our cafes, and it's still only 1% of all the beverages. So India is still a milk market. So my point is that while you can see what's happening in the global industry, you really have to make sure that you pay attention to the India context.
Thank you. Coming to you, Naveen, did you see the way you were processing coffees in your estate, the demand from your buyers? Did you start seeing changes over the last 10 years in the type of buyers, type of quantity? What has been your experience?
So when we started working with specialty coffee and specialty roasters, initially it was more of, it's more the roasters were more asking us for what we can provide them with. So for us, basically on the farm, we have quite a good experimental setup where we've got a base set up such a way that we can try a number of various processes. So it was more of, we were ready with a number of different processes, number of experimental processes that we could offer Matt and all the other roasters we work with, so people were able to have choices. So we did send out a lot of samples, people tried a lot of coffees. So initially it was, we'll take some of the safer ones, which were the washed coffees earlier, but then we'd also take a few of these experimental naturals or honey sun-dried coffees. And then we saw a steady climb after that. I think once the customers started getting a taste of what the coffees are and what they were doing an amazing job with roasting the coffees, and then the demand started for we need more of these, or we need more of the naturals or the more of the experimental coffees. So that's a climb we've seen, and then it's just a non-stop climb since then. So volume-wise, what we've done 10 years ago and for specialty coffees and what it is today is like almost 100-fold increase on the demand for coffee in India. And a lot of good producers, a lot of fantastic Indian coffees out there. So a huge advantage we have is, I think, if I speak on behalf of all the producers, every single coffee is different, every single estate is different. You can be neighboring farms, and then what you do with your coffee can make it completely different. So it's such a beautiful market to work with, and then we've got fantastic, like what Matt said, right now is a good time for coffee. People are aware of coffees, people are aware of good coffees, so it's a great time to be there, and then there's a huge demand for specialty coffees. So as long as we can keep processes in control, we have consistency in what we're processing, I'm seeing a beautiful increase in the spread of coffees at the moment.
Thank you. Yusuf, definitely your inputs on this and especially your experience will make a big difference because you have the opportunity to talk to planters from all over the world, traders from all over the world, have the experience to taste different types of coffees and cafes back home. Would you please share with us, I think there are a lot of cafe owners and home brewers who want to know your experience in terms of origins, planters, how they have evolved, and what is there for us as Indian planters and Indian cafes and roasters to look forward?
All right. I will correct something I said earlier. I started researching 6 years ago, importing 5 years ago. So the first year was about the summer of 2018 when I started getting new samples, experiencing the market, learning about the market. Anaerobics and fermented coffees were a defect. Like, people would not want to buy this coffee. A year later, people are looking for these coffees, but they don't know what they were. And then 2020, it became a huge thing. So from the year I started until now, I'm seeing a big shift from planters going from washed classic notes to actually having the, let's say, fermented, funky cups. So with that being said, that means the tasting palates of the consumers has changed to sweet cups. So when I started, washed classic cups were the thing. V60s and Chemex were a huge thing. Today we're talking about coffee of the day. So the cafe business today, from what I'm seeing, at least in the Saudi market, has gone to what's fastest thing can you get me for this amount? So I'm paying you, let's say, $3. Oh, the fastest coffee of the day. Take it and leave. From the planter side, they started with the classic coffees, as then got offered a lot of washed and classic naturals, which we miss. And then it went to all of the crazy fermentation for 2-3 years. That's because the high demand went there. Today, what I'm seeing is a lot of people are going back to classic because it's more sustainable. Plus, cafes and roasteries are asking for them because they're cheaper. So it's easier to produce 200-300 bags of one washed coffee than producing 100 bags of an anaerobic. The Saudi market in general is quite new, still going after names of origins. So we're still learning about the specialty market, the coffee market, and how we're going to evolve to the new future or the near future of coffee.
Thank you. I think the little roasting experience I've carried so far, I definitely think a mark of a roaster per se is the way they roast their washed coffees. Something simple, clean. I think the roasting machine has a huge influence on that. But it's very interesting to note that 2020 was the year where you started experiencing a lot of differently processed coffees, what was previously considered as defect coming into picture. Matt, would you like to share? I mean, see, we've all been part of seeing your journey where you're leading the way to showcase what can be done. What did you experience with Blue Turquoise in terms of the product shares of washed, honeys, experimental lots? What is your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Naturals are relatively new in the Indian context. I remember, for a long time, it was called cherry, right? And cherry was kind of the leftovers that you would just lay out on the yard. It's only been in the past couple of years that there have been, innovative growers such as my esteemed panelists here who've actually put in the effort to pick ripe cherries and do experiments on fermentation. And actually that's a flavor profile that's been embraced, but embraced by what I would say is sort of the niche market. It's the sort of specialty coffee enthusiasts who like these coffees and they love them, right? They sell very quickly, but it's small quantities. The majority of the coffee drinking population actually doesn't like that flavor profile. They prefer more of the wash flavor profile. So I think it's important to sort of keep that in mind when you are designing your offering at your cafe. If you're targeting sort of the specialty coffee enthusiast, then they'll demand the naturals. But if you're looking at more of a larger audience, then you don't want to off-put those customers.
Fair enough. I think, Naveen, I think there are a few planters as well over here. So one of the questions which I do face is there is an assumption that alternate process is specialty, correct? In your experience, have you seen a drastic change in the demand between a simple wash to a complex alternate process? Do you see changes or feedback? I mean, what's the feedback from your customers who are all over the world? Are you getting feedback to say, no, washed is here to go away or washed is here to stay? What do you think?
From the industry front, what I feel is washed coffees are here to stay. Coffees make up the majority of the production and the supply. And like what Shravan was mentioning was, the roasters play a huge role in how they roast the washed coffees. It can be modulated a little bit. You can get different profiles, and you can also get a lot of origin-specific profiles. And yes, with washed coffee, there are a lot of variations, which we do on our farm with different fermentations, different processing. But on the producer basis, just a clean washed, as long as we maintain our systems or how we're doing it, you're picking evenly picked. It does not have to be super ripes, but as long as you're picking it evenly, you're washing it. And I think primarily it's our drying conditions. If your coffee is dried really well, evenly and consistently, and there's no semi-wet, it's been raked on time, and specifically it's been stored well. A lot of farms, what we noticed, like we work with a number of smaller farms, and the coffee is fantastic, but it's been stored badly. So that makes a huge difference. So as long as we're doing following proper systems and how we wash it, how we store it after we wash it, it also plays a huge role in in the final cup.
Noted. Just moving on right now, something which will be interesting to share is what were some of the main hurdles you faced when you were introducing your product or your service, whether it is a roasted coffee, the green coffee, or even a service like a cafe? What were one of your hurdles, man?
I mean, for us, when we started, because there wasn't really a specialty industry at that point in time, it was awareness. I mean, even if I go beyond specialty, there was not even necessarily awareness among most people that India grew coffee. People were used to instant coffee, so we would get a lot of, I mean, actually we still do, we get complaints where people order the coffee and because it doesn't dissolve, they say, you know, you've screwed this roast up, this is a terrible coffee, because they're not expecting it to be something that they have to brew. So the biggest challenge, and continues to be, awareness to build the category.
Yusuf, I mean, from your perspective, when you got into trading as such, I mean, how did you go about deciding what are the origins you're going to present, who are you going to present, and what was your experience in terms of what are the hurdles and how did you overcome it?
Okay, I will give a bit of a feedback of overview how I started. I started by coincidence. So my friend's mom owns a coffee farm. I texted him out of nowhere and was like, hey, Pancho, does your mom still own the coffee farm? And he goes, yes. So I was like, send me samples. So I started Guatemalan coffee, not knowing anything about Guatemala, don't even know the processes. But after that, so Guatemala became the base of my business. I looked for classic coffee, one citrus and one chocolatey, just to get me into the doors. Afterwards, I start hearing what people want. Because the Saudi market is new, people want 4 origins. Do you have Ethiopians? Do you have Colombians? Do you have Brazilians? So that made it a bit challenging to go source based on origins than sourcing based on profile, okay? So I decided to go the hard way. I went to Guatemala. From Guatemala, I went to India. And India became a real challenge. Not because India doesn't have a great coffee, just because the publicity of Indian coffee is not the best. So people think of India, they would think as, oh, Indian coffee is probably similar to its food, just because they think the nature of the area will take care of it. So it must be earthy, spicy, not a good coffee. What I did is, in the beginning, I would have to give discounts just to get it into the door. I would have to do blind cuppings. It took a while. Like, I would go door to door. I'll try to push it. I will try to, like, hey, just use it for a blend. Like, I would try my best just to push that Indian coffee, just because there's no outside source that will help, like from an Indian producer, or there's no Indian brand that talks about Indian coffees. At that time, in 2020, I would say that was so popular in social media. That didn't have a big presence. Now there is. So today, the way I source a bit different than what the market wants. I don't have Ethiopians, I don't have Colombians. I look for profile, I look for sustainable producer to work with that will help to change the image, regardless if it was an Indian, Guatemalan, or Ethiopian, or Brazilian, or any origin I would work with. The market still resists. This year, surprisingly, it was the easiest year to sell Indian coffee. Is it because people are looking for a new thing? Are they bored of the same origins over and over again? Maybe because, maybe as well, one reason that the coffee prices went up, so that made them look for another alternative, or they look for what's available. Let's see something new, and it made them to go take a bit of a risk.
Got it. Naveen, coming back to you as planters, I think we all grew up knowing that there was only one way to do good coffee was to wash it. And like Matt was saying, everything else was cherry. I think even now, at times I have the discussion that there is a difference between washed, cherry, and naturals. How did you go about? Because you did mention that you were ready with experimentation, but there was a source to it. What is the risk percentage? Did you work with somebody who was able to take you through, or how was your journey where you started moving from just doing washed coffees to a honeys, to a complex honey, to a naturals? I mean, what was your journey like?
So for us, we started with really small volumes of experimental coffees. And I think our first biggest hurdle was getting our staff used to it. So my two brothers and I came back into the business in 2014. And until then, Dad was running the farm for the last 50 years. And he just did washed coffees where they washed it, dried, in third or fourth day, it was packed, bagged, and it was out of the estate, out of our hands. So all of a sudden, training your staff to like ferment it, put it on the yard, dry it for 30 days, your staff looked at you like, what the hell is wrong with this guy? We used to dry it in 3 days. What's his problem drying for 30 days? So it was really challenging to convince them, to tell them that this is what we want to do. But so how we did was we took our staff in with us and we made them cup coffees, let them know what they're doing, and only then they're going to realize what the difference is. So unless your staff knows what a over-fermented coffee tastes like, what a badly dried coffee tastes like, what defects taste like, what Quakers taste like, then he doesn't know what he's doing on the farm. So it was a process of about 4 years. Every year we increased our volumes in small jumps in the volumes, but it was a long training process and a lot of errors. So what we also realized was in specialty coffee, there's no, in the coffee industry, on the producer side, there's no good coffee and bad coffee because there's so much that can happen. So we made, for us mainly, our staff was advised to, we told them that there's no mistakes, but we want you to document what happens. So we said, hey, you know what? If you forget to cover it one night and it rains and the coffee gets re-wet, write it down. Because at the end of the day, when you cup the coffees, that might be a new method. So in fact, some of our most popular coffees we came about by accident. It's like we had 2 barrels of coffee which were forgotten, covered with tarpaulin and left aside. And then 15 days later, when we were cleaning the yard, we found these 2 barrels. And we realized, hey, there's coffee in there. So what do we do with it? So I said, okay, it doesn't matter. We'll dry it now. So we fermented for 18 days, actually. So 18 days it fermented in drums. Then we dried it. And then we roasted and tried it. It was like some of the best coffee we ever had. So we shared it out to some of us. Then that's become a new method now. So we told our staff, you document. Because what happens in specialty coffee is documentation is very, very important. Only then you can repeat a process. So documenting on day temperature, night temperature, your drying temperatures, your humidity, having a record of that is the only way you can repeat that. So if I supply a coffee to a roaster and he says, hey, this coffee is really good, I want the same one next year, we should know what bricks we harvested at, what is the night temperature, what is the day temperature. And as most producers will know, you're harvesting over 2.5, 3 months. So when you start harvesting, your night temperatures might be middle of winter, it might be 7 degrees at night. But when you're finishing your harvest in the end of February, your night temperature is 18 degrees. So your fermentation doesn't match. So unless you have it documented, you can't repeat it. So a lot of it came down to documenting, years of documenting, and then collecting data and evaluating your data. Because finally, at the end of the day, unless you have data to see what you have, you can't rematch the same coffee. So it was a learning process, it was a gradual process, a lot of mistakes along the way. As long as the mistakes are documented, they become final methods. So it was a slow, gradual process, but I think it was a process we all enjoyed. And basically, as long as you're drinking your own coffees, then you know what you're doing. So as long as the farmer is drinking his own coffees, he knows what's a good one, what's a bad one. And the minute the farmer's convinced that's a good coffee, it's easier for him to sell the coffee because you know it's a good coffee, you like it, and you know exactly how to do it. That's what I would say.
You just answered all the 12 questions in one go. That's not fair, man. Okay, so we got to cheer them up for that, right? No, just kidding, okay? Okay, so I think one of the important questions which he caught about was I was leading into the next one, I think, how do you maintain quality when you're growing? I mean, Matt, that's something which I think you can shed light into because I think the growth has been beyond what we spoke when we first met. How are you managing consistency and quality while also looking after growth?
Yeah, so I think people have I don't say misconception because it does happen, that if you grow, automatically quality is going to suffer. There's probably lots of examples of people who expanded too fast and then they lost control of what was happening. But actually, I feel very strongly that quality can only improve through growth. Coffee is not a very lucrative industry, and improving quality requires money. Training people to give them, upskilling them, that requires money. Hiring people who have the skills that you don't have, that requires money. Getting better equipment, adding on technology, all of those things are only possible once you grow and reach a certain scale. The other thing is that, especially in a cafe, in order to retain good performing staff, you need to grow. If you have 4 great baristas, guess what? There's can only be 1 cafe manager, right? So those people are going to ultimately reach a certain point where they're not able to find opportunities within your company, and then they're going to move on to other places. So if you're growing, then your good team members, you can give them growth opportunities, and they can stay within your organization, and they become assets. We have many people on our team who've been with us for years and years. Some of the oldest employees are 10 years old, and they started packaging the coffee, then they learned roasting, and one recently became a Q grader. So that's only possible if your organization is growing. So I think investing in people, hiring talent, layering on technology, and upgrading your equipment, all of those things are how we've been able to maintain our quality as we've grown.
How about you, Yusuf? I mean, from the time you started to now, how are you balancing it out?
So from my side as an importing, I don't have a big influence on the farm, but the key on growing is partner up with the right people. So Matt said training them, like spending on them to make sure they get to where they are. So that means his employees are technically his partner in the success story. So if you work with the right producer, you will eventually be able to grow because he's providing you with a good coffee. So he's taking care of that part for you. You don't grow and then ask for more coffee. You grow because you have a good producer that's pushing your coffee and doing a lot of work for you. Because as you know, green coffee has few obstacles to face. So when you produce a lot, are you going to be able to pick on time? Are you going to be able to have a consistent process? Are you going to be able to have a clean process? What if the coffee is bad? Because if the coffee is bad, you're going to have to wait for another year to be able to get that coffee again. But finding the right partner is the most important partner. When I say a partner is a producer, is the most important element in the importing business, and based on that, you grow. So the way I work is I select the producer, I don't select the coffee. The coffee could be bad and develop next year, but the producer, if he's bad and he had a good coffee by luck, next year he can guarantee you that.
Perfect. Moving on to, this is something I've personally seen in terms of marketing. I think so. This is something more apt for Naveen, and I think for us as a coffee planter, marketing was attending trade shows because there was not an opportunity left. I mean, even if you go back to 95, 96, it was even more tougher, correct? So the question comes is, how has marketing evolved in the business? For you especially, I think as planters, we have more platforms we can use right now. How did you use it? What was that you found useful? that somebody can also maybe use it or learn from it?
I think when it comes down to marketing, what I found was having a face to the voice, having a face to the phone number really helped. So I made the effort of meeting every single person I worked with. 'Cause I think you can meet someone, you get yourself introduced to him, you know each other, you don't need to do business the first year, but then 2 years down the line, when you are speaking to someone, you know who you're speaking to. So that matters a lot. So for us, most of the cafes we work with, we know each other personally. It's more on we know each other as friends, and then we work together. So that way, it's a different level of trust, first of all, and it's not like you meet someone the first day and then you have to work that year. It's like 2 years down the line, maybe the cafe has grown, he needs more coffee, so he calls you, and then it's like, hey, we met 2 years ago, so straight away you've already got something common. I didn't really do too much of the sending out blind samples because I just felt it's going to get lost in a sea of samples. So yes, a couple of them did work, but most of it is when you meet someone personally and then you have a rapport with the roaster or the importer directly, then it sets the game apart completely. You're no more strangers working with each other. It's more of you're known to each other. You're more of friends working with each other. I think that made a huge difference. So if anyone else is looking for people, I think it makes a difference if you can actually make the effort of meeting the person once. That way you guys know each other straight away, and then after that the business will follow after that. I've met Matt a couple of years ago, so it's quite easy when you work together, whether it's Matt or I work with Shravan, I work with Matt. It's nice because you know the person already. And then it's not like I'm going to not give the coffee that we promised or something because it's a friendship that depends on it. I think that's important.
You promise. You promise. You promise.
He took 9 years to give me his coffees. Then I took 8 years to put up a roastery, so that's okay. Yusuf, how important is marketing for you? And have you seen changes, or do you do it differently, let's say from when you started to doing it now? Let's put it across in this way. How important is social media for you?
As an importer, since you deal with a lot of business owners, it's not really big. It is good because it gives you credibility that, yes, your business is legit. But what I did, and I still do, is door-to-door sales. Because when they see you, they talk to you, they know by the end of the day, you're going to solve them a problem. So the whole, why do you start a business is to solve a problem, whether it's selling them coffee or selling them roasted coffee. So when you go talk, listen to them, listen to what they want, it's a complete different game than sending them a message, hi, I'm Yusuf, I sell green beans, and I can send you my offer list. What I used to do in the beginning is to send the offer list first. Today, I send it last. Because what happens, when people read the notes, see the price, they say no. So you keep everything mysterious, you send them the coffee, they try it, they go mind-blowing. Based on that, they pick. After they pick, you send them the notes, and you're like, yeah, I didn't get these notes, but it didn't really influence them. So I do door-to-door sale. I still keep an online presence just because you want other people to talk about you, even if they're not in the coffee business, even if they're just coffee lovers, because they could influence other people's opinion. Like when you have somebody going to Naveen's farm, Naveen might not roast, but they're like, I tried his coffee roasted in blue Tikai in his farm, and it was amazing. So that word will spread out, and organic, let's say word of mouth marketing is the best because it will give you high credibility, which will make people curious. So my style of marketing is door-to-door sale through connections. You become like friends with a few roasters who will introduce you to other roasters, and that's how you grow. At least in the importing side of it, and in our Saudi market or the GCC market, because I think Indian market and Saudi market have similarity where we need to trust you. So like, oh, hey, I know this guy, work with him. Do you trust him? Yes, done. Because coffee by the end of the day, it's an unknown product. You don't taste it immediately. You want to know that coffee is good. Even if you roast it badly, you can fix the profile.
Matt and Yusuf, I'm going to give you the same question split into two parts. It's from a planter's perspective. I think a lot of planters have asked the question, what is the right way for a planter to approach a roaster? How do I get your attention? Okay, so I see a few planters over here, so they've asked me the question. So how does a planter get your attention? I'm sorry, it's Madsen. Okay, so I know how I got your attention, but that was way back. I mean, Yusuf, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what Naveen said, is that having a face to the sample helps a lot. I mean, sometimes people just send us coffee, and there's just coffee and a card in there. If we get a lot of samples, it's possible that that card gets lost, and we're just sitting with the sample, and we have no idea who it came from and how to get in touch with that person. So I think really trying to develop a personal relationship is the way to go. Or having a lot of material that you send along. It's if you have great coffee, then you'll probably get through the clutter. We're always looking for new estates to work with. So if you have amazing coffee, regardless of what you put in there, and we cup it and we like it, we'll find you.
Great.
This is an interesting question. So what we don't like is when someone come and say, hey, this is my coffee, do you want to work with me? It's like, no. I technically don't know you. I probably would like to know your name, who you work with, your process throughout the year. Because I don't buy coffee now and I look for it the next year and it's gone. I think Matt will agree with me because he's a roaster. So what if this coffee goes in a blend and the blend takes off? If I call you the next year and you don't have the coffee, it's really bad on me. So do not just approach any buyer and say, here's my coffee. You probably would want to, just talk to him, give him sample to try for fun, hear his feedback. Maybe it will take a year or so for the buyer to come back to the producer and work with him. For example, I've met Naveen in Athens a few months ago. He didn't come up and say, hey, do you want samples? In fact, I still have not tried his coffee, So you have to be chill about it because a business deal, especially in the coffee world, is not going to happen just like that. It's not going to happen in a second. You would want to, smoothen the conversation, get into multiple samples, try 10 samples out of his coffee. Once you feel comfortable as an importer, once I feel comfortable and see consistency in the coffee, then I probably will consider buying. If I taste one sample and it's completely different the next year, no, I'm probably not going to work with you.
Extending on that, coming back to the cafe, I mean, how differently are you approaching marketing the cafe business?
So I think when we first started, we didn't really do a lot of marketing because there was sort of this latent demand for specialty. We were able to grow kind of through word of mouth and doing events. So in the beginning, we used to do a lot of pop-ups, be it farmers markets, just get the name out there, and then hold a lot of events within the cafe. Now, because the market has become more competitive, I don't think that would work today. And so you have to have more of an omni-channel approach to that. You still have to have your presence at events and do events within your own spaces, but social media is very important. Advertising on Zomato and Swiggy, getting your name out on whatever platforms are available is very important now because just people are busy. There's many cafes that they can go to. So how do you let people know about your space?
Just moving on from that, that's something which you touched upon as well. From the plantation practice, and this is something else which we'll do this. What are the main human resource challenges you face? I mean, in terms of skill availability, training, retention, what are the main challenges you face?
On the plantation front, we definitely face a challenge with moving labor. So you need to have, like for example, I can train someone last season on what to do with the coffees, train them all about fermentation, what to do, the practices, and then if he leaves the next year, you've got to get someone new, and then it's a continuous process. So I think retaining staff, rewarding staff. So we have a system. We run 9 different estates. So we have a system where every year we have a huge bonus structure where which estate sells the most coffee, which fetch the highest prices, which estate or which coffee scores the highest on our cupping sheets, and we have bonuses for that. And then we have a very strong traceability list on who picked those coffees, who processed the coffees. So I think traceability is also very important for estates because when you work with roasters, They want the same coffee every year, and then we can trace it back to exactly which zone of your estate you picked it from, what days they were picked on. Was it your first round, or was it your second round of picking, or was it a bulk lot, or which was that processed in December or January? So traceability plays a huge role, and for us, traceability plays a huge role because we're able to reward our workforce with that. So it's a very friendly competition that goes on within the workforce who's producing different coffees. Another method, what we started doing is end of the season every year, we give everyone a free hand because we have almost 50 to 60 people who are working on the yards and they've seen the different processes happening. So we give them a free hand and say, you know what, take 200 kilos of coffee cherry, you do whatever you want. You do whatever you want, you ferment with whatever you want, but record it. We need records. So that way, we've come up with a number of new methods with things which you never ever thought of, and someone else has tried it. As long as you document it, you get like 25 different coffees, and 2 of them will really stand out. And it's exciting for them to know what it tastes like at the end of the year. Like we've had green coffees that tasted like pickle. At the same time, we have green coffees that taste so good. I mean, roasted coffees. So it's an experimental process that every year works, and it's nice to keep the workforce entertained. They're excited. They want to know what the coffee cup is, and then whether we're going to follow their process the next year. So I think that's been difficult, but at the same time now it's easy to keep them entertained, keep them excited about what they're doing. So as long as you have the same consistent workforce working with you throughout.
Just taking from where he went in terms of the quantum of processing coming up with new names being thrown in, how does, I mean, especially for both of Matt and Yusuf, I mean, you work at the front end with cafes. How do you keep up with it in terms of training your staff? How do you make them understand? How do you understand it? How do you retrain them and hold them back? What do you, I mean, what is the...
No, I think there's I would say, dearth of talent in our industry. There are people, there's lots of people, but the right people, getting the right people is quite difficult. You can teach anybody how to make a cup of coffee, but teaching people the soft skills to deliver good customer service, to be able to explain what these coffees are about, and to be able to engage with customers is much harder. And you know, you have to understand that barista jobs are not super high paying jobs, right? And so the people who are often coming and working at these jobs are from a very different socioeconomic background than the customers that they're serving. And that creates a big barrier, right? And understandably, people are intimidated. So we put a lot of time and effort in really building people's soft skills more than their coffee knowledge.
How about, what do you, I mean, see that, I'll split the question into 2 parts. How do you handle it at your company? And because you work with a lot of roasters in different market, I think if you can share your experience of what you've observed with your clients as well.
So, because I work directly with the producers, that gives me the privilege to learn directly from them and know the story very well and why they picked that, why didn't they do this, why they did that. Gather all the information, and when I go speak to roasters, I share the right information with them, you know. When someone said like, oh, I want to scale up to this amount with an anaerobic or something funky, and I'd be like, no, it's impossible unless you want to pay in advance. So giving this information to them trained some of the customers I have mentally to ask the proper questions because they get the proper answer. You know, like, as Matt said, some people don't have the soft skills, so they would ask ridiculous questions. They would ask ridiculous things. But if you know and you work closely with your producer, you would have very clear answer. You can organize the answer to them to give them an easy summary of what the farmer is doing, for you to get that cup of coffee, and why is it hard to scale up, why is this one easier to scale, why this note is not sustainable, what's going to happen with this coffee next year. You know, like that way, the roasters that I work with feel a lot more comfortable trying something new or not. And yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so I think something which I think a lot of us, especially with home consumption increasing, especially for Naveen, I think all of us can answer is how has the new processing affected and where is the limit? For example, accidentally I left the coffee for 90 days and not 15 days. I don't know how it's turned up. I've left the packet in the roastery. I mean, you know, for all of us, how much does it influence our business and is there a limit to it?
From what we've seen, there's a market for every kind of coffee. There's, like, for example, as you go towards the far east, towards South Korea, people like extremely fermented coffees. And the same coffee, if we send it to someone in Europe, they just hate even the smell of the green coffee. So there's a market for every single coffee. It depends on, that's why when I come back to saying, as long as the farmer likes that coffee or appreciates his coffee, it's easier for me to sell it. So I've had, like for us, I mean, I've got a palate which I like all kinds of coffees. I don't mind extremely fermented. So as long as I like the coffee, I'm able to talk to someone and say, hey, you know what? It's different from the others. You can do it a little darker, or you go extremely light on this, and it actually tastes good like this. So as long as the farmer's aware of what he's doing and is drinking his coffees, I'm quite interested in trying out this 90-day fermentation.
Yeah, it's Komal. It's in Komal's outlet. Komal is not there, so yeah, give it to her. So where are you, Komal? Yeah, it's in your outlet. Okay. Yeah, no, she'll come back to it, okay? I mean, Matt, what do you think? Where's the limit? I mean...
Yeah, I think there's a place for it, but we've kind of reached that place, I feel. All different types of fruit fermentations are going on with different hours, and how can you expect someone at a barista at the cafe to be able to communicate that to a customer, right? He has so many other things going on. How is he or she going to be able to say, this coffee is from Orchardale Estate, it was grown next to XYZ plants, and it was fermented with all of these fruits? They're not going to be able to do that. They're struggling when the customers are saying, why isn't my coffee piping hot, right? So they have much more basic challenges to deal with. And actually, those matter more to the customer, or I would say matter more to the majority of customers than the few people who are actually interested in these fermentations. But I mean, they're nice coffees. The flavor complexity is there, but I would say the majority of customers are looking just for a nice coffee experience with a complex tasting coffee, but not necessarily so complex.
I'll change the question a little bit, okay? That's for you. What's the funkiest coffee you've had? Except for Komal's.
Oh, except for that curveball. I'm just kidding. I had some infused coffees, and they tasted absolutely disgusting. That I could tell you. I've had a lot of like funky cups. Some coffees tasted like vinegar, and I had, because they're so over fermented, and I had some really clean fermentation coffee. But I think what we forget is coffee, and if you want to drink juice, just go pick up a bottle of juice and drink it. You know, like, I think we played so much with the fermentation that we're leaving the coffee on one side, and we're just throwing a bunch of flavors in to like satisfy ourselves.
Yeah. I think it comes back to the original question, what's the balance between a good washed coffee and fermentation?
So a good washed coffee is what we call like a coffee tasting coffee. It's like the classic, usually, okay, I'll point this out. Washed coffee is not acidic and naturals are less acidic. That's just the myth that people push out there to make you drink a natural coffee. You know, you can taste washed coffees that are sweet, heavy body, and you can taste naturals that are acidic and light body. So the washed coffee point is you get a clean cup, consistent, easier work on the farmer. You can store it for a longer time, right? You can store it for a longer time before you roast it. And it's easy to drink, sustainable price-wise and production-wise. The fermentation is just a way for the producer to show off technically and say, yeah, I can make you this coffee, I can get into this market. But the point of it is to be unique and pleasant. Like, it's a dessert coffee like you would drink once every few days, a good after a meal. If you want to impress someone, you want to change his perspective on coffee, like, oh, I can make you a coffee that'll taste like grapes, whatever. But it's not there to make 3-4 containers of a fermented coffee. You know, it's not sustainable. It literally could kill, and Naveen could correct me, the whole harvest if it goes bad.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Coming to next, Matt, I think if you could throw some light is how important is technology and automation for business, and how are you using it in your cafes right now?
Yeah, I think it's important to help maintain consistency and quality. So, for example, we put in place tools that still retain the art of making coffee, but try to make their job easier. So, for example, having grinders that automatically dose the correct weight, having a puck press that tamps to the same pressure every time, having the scales within the machine so that you're always dispensing the correct recipe for your espresso. And then we have a flow, which basically measures every shot that's served in the cafe. I think, you know, full automation probably is ultimately going to be the future, but for us, it kind of doesn't feel right. Just pressing a button and having the full coffee dispense, that I feel that kind of loses the authenticity of the experience. And so for us, that's not something that we would do. But if we're able to give baristas tools to help them do their job easier so that ultimately they can work on delivering a better experience to customers, that's how we see technology.
Yusuf, how about you? I mean, how important, I mean, as an importer, I mean, how is technology important, or is it influencing your decision making as such?
Because I'm an importer, not really, but I've faced some issues with roasters who are using the full automated roasting machine and coming back to me saying your coffee is bad. Why? Because he roasted it in a machine where you press a button and the coffee will come out regardless. So, but I think that, you know, by then today, that's going to be the future. We have to deal with it. A lot of cafes are going to move to the self-service thing and press a button and it gets something. We will miss the human touch to it, but from that's the cafe perspective. From the producer perspective, it will definitely help us to get a consistent cup. I don't know how it's going to affect the producer's life because I'm not a producer, but it's not really going to influence my business because, as Naveen said earlier, there is a room for everyone. You know, if somebody want to be fully automated, there's someone who's not going to be fully automated. So,
Yep. I mean, Naveen, I mean, as a planter, we know there is challenges to any form of mechanization. Automation is secondary, but I'm sure there is development in technology. And you did talk about data as a sense. To what extent are you using, or how do you see technology and helping, I mean, how, and technology and a bit of automation helping us at the plantation, especially at the processing level?
See, collection of data is something that we've really paid attention to in the last 10 years. So we first mapped every farm on elevation, soil type, intercrop, your soil pH, your carbon content, maintaining that data. So what happens, how it helps us is, for example, if I'm giving Matt a particular lot of coffee of 2 tons, and then suddenly the next year he tells me, hey, you know what, Naveen, the coffee was really good. Okay, we have 8 tons of the coffee. I may not have 8 tons being produced in the same zone, but I might have 8 tons on another farm, similar elevation, similar soil type, similar mixed crop, similar age of the plant. So then I'm able to match it and say, hey, you know what, I've got another coffee which is quite similar. You try it out, you roast it and see if you think it's similar, then we can put those 2 lots together. So maintaining data and being able to use it, keeping it in a usable method is easy. I mean, makes life so much easier on the farm front for you to work with people. So I think on the farm front, it's important that you first know your zone perfectly, keep up with your soil samples yearly, keep up with all your records. So now, for example, you know exactly where you can match it. Then after that, it's easier to work with. That's one part of technology where, I mean, we still go back to the old method of using spreadsheets to maintain all that. But as we're able to put together and use that information, that's what's important, as long as you have usable information. Otherwise, when it comes to automation of the farm, what we've moved on to using an iKawa, so it's easy for us to roast, maintain profiles, and easy to communicate with the buyer. So when you send a coffee, I'm roasting in one profile back home. I like the profile. If I send it out to someone else and I say, hey, you know what, I can send them the same profile, so we're at least talking the same language, so it's easy to discuss the same coffee. That made things a lot easier for us, especially working with roasters who are far away. That changed a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I think you made a point that I didn't mention. So it helps, so the producer and the importer connect, for example, you know, on the technology level, like what he said in the Ikawa, I could say, hey, like, your coffee didn't roast well, hey, just use this profile, plug it, you know, and make sure you roast it for this long and you'll get the same cup, which makes things easier.
I think moving on to the next question, especially for Yusuf, I think it's super, I think, especially for a lot of us as planters and roasters, there is a lot of similarities between the Indian cafe market, home consumption market, you know, with Saudi and the Middle East. There also an observation with the amount of new brands coming in, new processes, new brands, new cafes. What's your take on it? And at the same time, when you have artisanal brands coming in, there are also larger companies, especially from the Indian context. We are also having larger brands coming in, right? How can you share your experience of what you're reading in Saudi, which is a much faster market, is what I assume in terms of coffee?
So Saudi is, as everybody knows, it's a growing market. It's opening up. And coffee started in Saudi about 2010, 2011, so it's not long ago. So we're still in the very early stages. We saw cafes, especially specialty cafes, going from 10 in a year to thousands in a year. And now I think we're sitting at 5,000, 6,000 coffee shops in Saudi. There is no specific number, but the last stat I saw is around 5,000 something in 2022. Roasters jumped to over 150 roasteries. So the market in Saudi is going to blow up. It's, of course, going to take a downturn sometime soon, as it already took one, because it's, you know, it's the graph has to go down, mature itself a bit, and then go up. We saw a lot of newcomers. A lot of people are opening up. I mean, big brands are spreading like crazy in Saudi. You pass every gas station, you'll see a drive-through of a bigger brand. So the market is blowing up, in specialty specifically.
Matt, the same question, I think there are two angles to this. One, how do you read the Indian market? Because I think you're one of the few people who kind of started this whole revolution per se. That's one part of it as to how do you read the market? Second, I mean, you're also somebody who your brand has gone international right now, correct? What's your take on it? And especially, you know, you're operating out of a very, very tough market like Japan. What is the difference is the second question. The first question is, how do you see the Indian market?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting that you said that there's 5,000 cafes in Saudi. In India, I think we have 4,000 to 5,000. So if you compare Saudi to India, it just shows you how sort of under-penetrated cafes are. So I see huge scope for people to open cafes in this country, especially as the country is growing. This is a good growth rate for us. So as India grows, the cafe market will only grow even faster. To answer your second question, I mean, Indian coffee is very underappreciated outside of India. When I travel to other parts of the world, I never see an Indian coffee on the menu. And the coffee that you guys are growing and the coffee that we're sourcing from other estates could really sit on the menu of any specialty cafe anywhere in the world. So I think the challenge and the opportunity is how do you elevate what's happening here. So in Japan, that's happening through pop-ups and cafes, and I think when people actually taste that, they're shocked to see that this is the quality that's coming out of India because they had no idea. So it's very similar to what was happening in India 10 years ago, right? That's the same kind of challenge and opportunity that we have in other markets.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, see, as planters for both of you, and you have a huge responsibility to sell our coffees and make sure they're sold at the right place. Okay, so with that, I would definitely like thank everybody who has sat patiently and listened to us. I hope I could have done justice with the questions and we have done justice with the answers. Thank you so much for all the panelists over here. Thank you so much for taking time out and talking. And I'll open the floor out. If anybody has questions, please do ask. Yes?
My question is to Matt, but also to everyone else. So with the fourth wave of coffee, people starting to brew at home, do you think that it will affect the business of cafes, especially in the specialty coffee area?
No, because I see cafe right now is an indulgence. There's not the culture here where you grab a coffee on your way to work and it's more functional. People are going to cafes as an experience. So I think that actually more people brew at home, I think will actually lead to more people visiting the cafes and vice versa. So I see them as very complementary rather than competitive.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Atreya. So my question is, I'm a microbiologist. So the thing is, how much innovation in strain level do you think is important in order to see the fermentation and the end result matters? So that is my first question. But again, not taking consideration into geographical importance of the coffee.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't understand the first part, please.
What level of fermentation and which all species do you prefer to work with?
Got it.
So one
Okay.
is mostly everybody works with yeast is common, Saccharomyces cerevisiae and Boulardii. So other than that, have you tried anything else? And not considering the elevation and other demographic and cultural part of it, because how generalizable that is and how that is important considering the repetitiveness of the same flavor notes. Thank you.
See, as an estate and as a roaster, I will give you the answer, correct? One thing I've learned is the natural yeast which is present in the estate as what we called as the mosto. That nothing is as efficient because it's the local yeast which is acting on it. Yes, Saccharomyces cerevisiae and a particular strain which is used in the wine industry is the closest come to coffee for use for coffee, unless Lallemand has come up with a different strain of it, correct? Arabica reacts differently. Excelsior Liberica reacts differently. That's the question we were talking, is we're trying to find balance. We don't have an answer. At the end of the day, clean wash coffees will always be the dominant force. Now, for example, when you look at the prices, correct? I will take an Arabica. I will spend money in getting yeast. I will spend money in putting up a processing center and do the processing and generate higher value. The cost involved in it will make the final revenue for that lesser than the washed coffee which I have just washed it. So find balance, and you don't close your eyes or your taste buds to anything to say this is what is. Like I said, everything is, most of the processing, or rather one of the most unique coffees we have done in our estate or his is by mistake. But one of the, at times, okay, so one of the most unique coffees which we find, which the buyer comes back, is by mistake. I'll give you a small example. Today in our stall, our barista pulled an espresso shot by accident for 60 seconds. And we had a Q grader who got the coffee and was panicking. He actually loved it. That was by mistake. It only works on one coffee. So to ask your answer, we're still discovering. Processing in coffee is very, very brand new. We only have scratched the surface. For me, for my estate, more than Saccharomyces cerevisiae, the juice of the coffee has more efficiency and cost benefit.
I love your answer. Anyway, there is a lot of permutation and combination to this, but we will discuss it off floor. Thank you.
Can we take more questions offline, please? Yes?
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
Thank you. So I request Komal to kindly come on stage to honor these young entrepreneurs who are riding high on innovation. So a big round of applause to each one of them. Mr. Shravan. Matt, is it now? Yeah, Matt. That's Matt Chittaranjan. Mr. Naveen. And finally, Shravan. All right, thank you so much for being here. Good day to all of you.
Thank you so much.